Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Electropop Therapy. Oh, no. Sorry, guys. I got a late start today, so my brain's still a little foggy. No, you're listening to Media Cyphers. Only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or online at Wider FM or Western Michigan University. Okay. Get it together. Goodness. All right. So, again, if you do not regularly tune in to our program, Media Cyphers, we come on to your radio dial every Tuesday at noon, tell you what's going on here in the Kalamazoo community, here in the state of Michigan, and all over the world, from a working class perspective. A couple of lefties who read too many books and are still on that making them wages. So today is going to be kind of a truncated show. Was going to have a little bit more for y'all. I had some family stuff I had to attend to last night, so couldn't prepare a recorded set as I usually do. But there's some local stories that I really wanted to touch on. And we're going to be spending a good chunk of the hour, a good chunk of our time. We're going to be rebroadcasting an episode of Democracy Now! Talking about Juneteenth. By the way, happy Juneteenth. And I'll be referencing an article about Juneteenth shortly as well. But I, of course, want to start the show with some local coverage. And today's going to be probably more heavy on the articles than the analysis. But there is some important stuff that is dropped in the local newsosphere that I thought was important. And at the top here, I wanted to talk about this article about affordable housing. Before we do, just a real quick reminder, y'all are listening to Wider. And if you like what you're hearing on the program, you like independent college radio, you can go to our website. There's a little donate button you can click on, show your appreciation, and help Wider continue and survive into the future. But going on, we've got this article here about affordable housing here in Kalamazoo County, and it's based on a countywide survey that was done. It's an article from MLive, written by A.M. Miller. Affordable housing is main concern for Kalamazoo County residents, survey finds. This was published on June 10th. The majority of renters in Kalamazoo said housing was unaffordable in a survey conducted by the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research. No matter what is weighting it, the number one response was a priority around housing, affordable housing for vulnerable people. Brian Patelko, Promise Research Coordinator for W.E. Upjohn, said, "Not just the unhoused, but people of lower income, people with disabilities, and seniors." The Upjohn Institute received 3,000 total responses through letters and online survey responses, though not all of them were completed responses. Over 3,500 letters were mailed out to listed addresses in Kalamazoo County, Emily Petz, Community Development Coordinator for W.E. Upjohn, said. The Kalamazoo County Housing Plan Survey was presented to the public Wednesday evening at the Kalamazoo County Administration Building, where community members had the opportunity to give feedback. The survey closed on May 22nd. One overarching theme of responses was that housing in Kalamazoo, particularly for renters, was unaffordable. 62% of responders who rent housing said they feel their housing is unaffordable. The majority of owners, 84.7%, feel their housing is affordable. So just real quick, that is a pretty huge class dynamic there. So again, 62% of renters say it's unaffordable. 84.7% of people who own their own homes feel housing is affordable. There's a reason for that. And the article doesn't quite dive into it, but Even for those who are paying mortgages, mortgage rates are substantially less than what you might have to pay for rent at any particular property. So, say you're renting from a house here in the Vine neighborhood or, the college campus area. A lot of houses go, $2,000, 5-bedroom. Just a random example. The mortgage there might only be $500 to $800 a month. Landlord is making a tidy profit, but it's all the much more difficult for people to make rent on time and to be able to afford it. Housing is considered affordable if you spend 30% or less of your gross income on housing, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. From the $50,000 to $100,000 income level, the majority of respondents said they spend 30% or less of their income on housing. For the $25,000 to $50,000 income level, 28% of respondents said they spent 31% to 40% of their income on housing, followed by 24.2% who said they spent 21% to 30% of their income on housing. On the lowest income level, less than $25,000, 37.8% of respondents spend more than 50% of their income on housing. So again, that's according to this survey. We're talking to working class folks, the $25,000 to $50,000 range. That's 40%. Almost half have to spend over 31% of their income. And for working class folks making less than $25K a year, that's almost 40% of people who have to spend more than half of their monthly income just on housing. The largest number of respondents chose affordable housing for low-income and vulnerable communities as one of their top 3 priorities for supporting housing. One community member at Wednesday's meeting acknowledged how their consideration of what's affordable may not be determined by the 30% benchmark. That just goes to show that maybe they're so used to having to pay that they think that's normal, the person said. Murray Balcom, Kalamazoo County Housing Director, said the average fair market rent in the county, around $812, is unaffordable for anyone making less than $15.80 an hour, according to Kalamazoo's Housing Resources Incorporated. We know that the wages have not kept up with the housing costs, Balcom has said. That gap for many folks just makes housing simply unaffordable. And let's say you can't afford housing, well, we don't have any units, so there's literally nowhere to go. The majority of respondents said their current and preferred home was single-family housing. There was also a slight increases in respondents indicating a preference for tiny homes, accessory dwelling units, cottage courts, and live work compared to what housing stock is currently available. Respondents were also asked to indicate in what housing location they currently live and the housing location they would prefer to live in. On the survey, a description of each region was included in addition to a graphic showing building density. 41% of respondents listed their current housing location as central urban, general neighborhoods, while the second largest percentage, 37.8%, listed it as suburban. 37.9% of respondents listed their preferred zone as suburban, and 26.4% listed their preferred zone as rural. The lowest amount of respondents listed their current and preferred housing as urban center, the neighborhood outskirts of downtown, or urban core, that's central downtown. One concern addressed at the meeting was that a priority should be placed on ensuring individuals can stay in houses they currently occupy and renters receive down payment assistance so they can transition into home ownership. Traditionally, historically, if you own your own home, then you're going to pay less, one community member said. But it has always been told the very poor, they don't know how to own a home, and we shouldn't get them into a home because their credit is messed up, not thinking that all of the things that's going on with the high cost of rent was keeping them from improving their credit. And again, another way of saying that is if you're paying high rent every single month, that makes it all the more difficult to save up to get a down payment on a house, which, again, is astronomically more expensive than it would be to buy a house 20, 30, 40 years ago. So keeping all of those things in mind. 2 more community input sessions will be held on June 15th, one at 4:30 in Interfaith Homes. That's 1037 Interfaith Boulevard. And the second at 6:30 in Oshimo Township. Well, I guess these already happened, but the data will be used to inform the county's decisions regarding housing spending in the future. The more feedback we get, it's just that much better, and the plan is that much better, Balcom said. I know a lot about housing and the built environment, but of course I don't know everything, and I don't know every issue where people are struggling, where we might need to put resources. So when people are honest and they give feedback, it is invaluable. Only other quick note, I think long-time listeners of the program will know Mary Balcom is not an unfamiliar name. Not yet, you know, we don't automatically assume bad intentions. Although we do know from prior experience, you know, a lot of criticism about the corporate, heavily corporate way that they handled the land bank. So my guess is, you know, from Mary Balcom's perspective, you know, they're more conservative. We're going to be seeing a lot of market-based solutions style rhetoric. That being said, there have been some positive developments over at the land bank. Some leadership that really is taking affordable housing as a priority. So we will be following all of these issues, of course. But again, that was an article from MLive. Affordable housing is main concern for Kalamazoo County residents, according to survey. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Your only source for political revolution. We're going to take a quick little break. Got some more issues to talk about when we come back. Keep your dial locked. Hello, everybody. We are back. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR. We're online at widerfm.org. So I think the next thing that we wanted to talk about, I wanted to give y'all another update about what is going on with, excuse me, the baby formula story. And if you'll remember, we talked about it a little bit the other week, talking about some of the kind of capitalist incentives and disincentives that caused that shortage and that crisis. And I thought the World Socialist website had some really good coverage talking about it's kind of like a perfect storm of what happens when, you know, we have a corporation skimping on their infrastructure. We have extreme rain events spurred on by, you know, the climate crisis. And the essential gist of it is that the Abbot baby formula factory in Michigan is going to have to shut down yet again because of those severe storms that we had last week. So I'm going to go ahead and read from the article. It's from the World Socialist website. Flooding of Abbott baby formula factory in Michigan forces new shutdown amid severe national shortage. It's written by Kevin Reed, published on June 17th. Less than 2 weeks after it reopened, the largest baby formula factory in the U.S., Abbott Laboratories, announced on Wednesday that severe thunderstorms and flooding caused by backed-up storm sewers in Sturgis forced the operation to be shut down again for a few weeks. A company press statement said that high winds, hail, power outages, and flood damage throughout the area resulted in flooding in parts of Sturgis, including areas of our plant. As with everything related to the catastrophic baby formula shortage and the bacteria-infested and unsanitary conditions at the Sturgis factory, Abbott Labs, which generates $7 billion in profits annually, never takes responsibility for anything other than making money for its investors. The company did not bother to explain how it is possible for heavy rains to flood its primary pediatric nutritionals production facility. The press statement went on to say that Abbott Labs halted manufacture of its EleCare specialty formula that was underway in order to assess the damage and clean and resanitize the plant. As though the public should accept assurances from the company and the Food and Drug Administration that everything is going to be just fine in Sturgis, the statement says Abbott Labs has informed the federal government agency and will conduct comprehensive testing in conjunction with the independent third party to ensure the plant is safe to resume production. The statement does not say who the third party is or what they will do to ensure safe and sanitary production at the plant. This is the same factory that was belatedly closed by the FDA last February after an inspection found the presence of standing water, roof leaks, and mold in various locations, including within the machinery where the powdered baby formula is produced. It was precisely this water in areas of the Sturgis factory that should always be kept dry that became an environment for the growth of deadly bacteria, such as Chronobacter and Salmonella, which were found to be one of the cause of illness and death among children who consumed Abbott Labs products in late 2021 and early 2022. The company and the FDA are maintaining that there is no proven connection between the cases of infection and deaths among infants and the presence of bacteria at the Sturgis plant. However, the latest events do prove that the company and the government are disinterested in maintaining the infrastructure necessary to prevent the flooding of the critical baby formula factory. Attempting to shirk any blame for this new man-made disaster, the Abbott Labs statement referred only to heavy rains overwhelming the city's stormwater system. The city issued its own statement on Wednesday and said that the flooding at the factory likely was a combination of the city system being at capacity and being unable to receive any additional water from the Abbott site, as well as Abbott's on-site system being pushed to capacity. It is a fact that the corporations in the U.S. baby formula industry have been reducing product safety for years with the collaboration of the FDA. According to a recent report in The Intercept, records show that the industry successfully mobilized against a 2014 proposal from the FDA to increase regular safety inspections of plants used to manufacture baby formula. 8 years ago, the FDA proposed measures to prevent contamination of baby formula with bacteria, but the plan was rejected by an industry association called the International Formula Council, now known as the Infant Council of America, because it would eat into corporate profits. The group wrote a letter to the FDA saying that compliance with the new rules would cost the industry $20 million annually, and therefore, the IFC believes that the additional requirements for end-of-shelf life testing under the final rule are unnecessary and burdensome, and do not provide any additional public health benefits. Yeah. Instead of protecting the interests of the public, according to The Intercept, the FDA incorporated rules that reduce the frequency of stability testing for new infant formulas from every 3 months to every 4 months. Again, basically caved to corporate pressure. Meanwhile, as families continue to scramble to find formula, the monopolies that control the U.S. industry, Abbott Labs, Mead Johnson, Perrigo, and Nestle, are raking in record profits. According to data provided by Ibis World to Axios, profit margins in 2022 are 14.2% as opposed to 11.6% in 2021. Ibis World said, while the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted supply chains and caused input costs to increase, high demand for formula and high market share concentration have allowed manufacturers to increase prices and maintain profit. Abbott Labs, the giant nutritionals corporation, which paid its CEO and chairman of the board, Robert Ford, more than $22 million in 2021, and the rest of baby formula industry have demonstrated that the health and well-being of infants and children are not within their list of priorities, which are exclusively focused on financial performance and stock buybacks. The same is true of the Biden administration and the U.S. Congress, who have made it clear that the war against Russia and Ukraine is much more important than the ability of families to locate baby formula, which is now 11% more expensive than it was 1 year ago. Workers at the Sturgis factory of Abbott Labs can place no confidence in the company that has repeatedly demonstrated that it is incapable and disinterested in maintaining the standards necessary to produce high-quality and safe baby food. A rank-and-file factory committee that is independent of the company, the unions, and the government must be organized at the plants. The committee must begin the fight as part of the expanding struggles of the working class in every industry to place the production of baby formula under workers' control based on the needs of families and not the profits of Wall Street. Putting an end to the baby formula shortage requires a struggle against the capitalist system and for socialism. That was an article from the World Socialist website. Article headline, Flooding of Abbott Baby Formula Factory in Michigan forces new shutdown amid severe national shortage. We will be right back. We're going to take a quick little break. We got a couple more stories to talk about in this hour. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution.
Driving after drinking can be very deadly. Instead, plan a safe ride home with a designated driver or call a sober friend to pick you up. This has been a message from 89.1 Wider FM online at widrfm.org.
Hello, Wider listeners. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Again, doing a kind of an article-heavy program today. And then at 1 o'clock, I'm going to be tossing it off where we'll be featuring Democracy Now!'s coverage of the Juneteenth holiday. So yeah, just little inside baseball. Had some stuff to deal with yesterday. Was not able to record a session with Lawrence. Some family stuff I had to attend to. Family emergency, as it were. But of course, still want to bring you some important news and stuff that we've scoured across the fair and free press, or what's left of it, I should say. So, this one really caught my eye. This is a national issue, but it takes a look at a little deeper dive into exactly what inflation is all about, and some of these plans by the Federal Reserve to address it, which are extremely classist in nature. Now, when we're talking about Federal Reserve plans, usually these can quickly get very abstract and bogged down in jargon, and I thought this article does a really good job of breaking down in very simple language just how the Federal Reserve is planning to screw over working class people. So with that, I want to tell you about this article. This is from Left Voice. It's written by Matthias Hoff and Guadalupe Bravo. It's published on June 18th. Headline is, Federal Reserve's plan to curb inflation is an attack on the global working class. On Wednesday, at the end of a two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell announced a tightening of monetary policy in response to the highest U.S. inflation in 40 years. The burden of this measure will fall disproportionately on the working class, both in the U.S. and abroad. In a press release, the FOMC said the current inflation rate reflected supply and demand imbalances related to the pandemic, higher energy prices, and broader price pressures. The Fed raised its benchmark policy rate by 0.75 percentage points, the first increase of this magnitude since 1994. This raises the target range for the federal funds rate to 1.5 to 1.75%. The Fed will also continue reducing its holdings of Treasury securities and agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities. The Fed is maintaining the course it has adopted since the end of last year as a way out of the pandemic's economic effects, reaffirmed this year by the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has caused energy and commodity prices to sharply increase. These tightening measures have already caused a drop in U.S. stock prices, but the effects will go much further, harming the working class both in the United States and internationally. At first glance, the Fed's aim to curb inflation, which sits at 8.6%, by cooling the economy, higher interest rates. At first glance, the Fed's aim is to curb inflation. By cooling the economy. Higher interest rates strongly affect the working class since they make credit more expensive, and it becomes more expensive to spend money, thus reducing people's disposable income. Higher interest rates also often cause governments to impose austerity measures since it becomes more expensive for them to borrow money. In the United States, the Fed's aggressive plan could also increase unemployment by discouraging investment and hiring. This would set the stage for lowering wages. Powell argued weeks ago that wages are rising too quickly and that the labor market is tight to an unhealthy level. In other words, employment is too high. By the way, I just want y'all to understand just how much the ruling class hates the working class, where you got the head of Federal Reserve under a Democratic president basically saying, working people are making too much money. We need to lower wages. And that's seen as like, that's something that should be done to address inflation. Oh, man. As we've previously argued, wages and employment are not to blame for the inflation rate. In fact, inflation has been eating into real wages, part of a pattern of workers losing ground in terms of pay for several decades. Powell, of course, says nothing about growing inequality and sees no problem with billionaires enjoying explosive wealth growth during the pandemic while millions were plunged into extreme poverty. To make matters worse for the working class, there are indications that the global economy is headed towards a new recession. The climate crisis and threats of famine add fuel to this fire. The U.S. GDP composes 25% of world GDP, and the country has important trade relations with almost every country. For dependent countries and regions like Latin America, the Fed's moves to curb inflation threatens to have serious international ramifications, exacerbated by an increasing subordination to the IMF. For example, there may be slower economic growth internationally. The rate hike has already caused a decline in U.S. output prospects and could lead to a more sustained decline. This would put the same pressure on the rest of the world, endangering the jobs and incomes of millions of people, especially in the most fragile economies. Increasing the interest rate also favors the movement of capital toward the dollar as a safe haven. That means to dollarize, investors will reduce their holdings in local currencies, adding pressure on the demand for the U.S. currency. In fact, both the Brazilian real and Chinese yuan have devalued by 6.3% in the last quarter, and the pressure on the Argentinian peso is growing. These devaluations can then cause price increases. The increase in the price of imports, both of final and intermediate goods, raises inflation in local economies. Finally, the Fed's moves can increase the cost of international credit. In other words, access to credit will be restricted and the cost of foreign debts in dollars will increase. This raises the risk of default in some emerging economies such as Argentina. In this context, the Fed's interest rate hikes aren't just abstract monetary policy. They will reverberate far beyond the U.S. economy. And as always, capitalists and their institutions are interested in self-preservation, stability, and continuing exploitation. Workers and the poor, both in the U.S. and independent and semi-colonial countries, will be forced to shoulder the burden of these measures. This means it's more important than ever for the working class to organize and confront these attacks. Again, that is from Left Voice. Article headline: Federal Reserve's plan to curb inflation is an attack on the global working class. Check that out. Some really good coverage, and I think some really important analysis, because you get kind of lost in the sauce trying to figure out what the Fed is talking about. And again, it's all about squeezing more out of the working class so that the people on Wall Street can see number go up. Hooray. Yes. Line go up. Yay. Woo. It doesn't really matter about the real wages of working people. Gonna take a quick little break. Got a couple more stories for y'all out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution.
Who gave you permission to throw a rave without me?
Oh well, this is 89.1 WIDR FM, online at WIDRFM.org.
Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR, or online at widerfm.org. Before we go on to last story, so again, today's been more me reading from the news, which is also important in its own way, but I do want to highlight some really fantastic work that we've been doing over on the podcast. We've got a podcast, Media Cyphers Kzoo. You can find that on most podcasting applications these days: Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, whatever other little programs you use, and go podbean.com too. You can go straight to the source. And wanted to highlight that because we've been doing some really good work over there. Last couple of episodes, me and Lawrence have done some really important deep dives into gun control, the January 6th hearings, litany of other issues, and a little further in our archives, we've got some really important interviews talking about the rise of kind of like these right-wing anti-gay politics, as well as much more analysis of the origins of the anti-abortion movement, etc. So, again, I really want to highlight, especially thanks to Lawrence and all the amazing guests that we have on our show. We do some really incredible coverage. I want to shout out to all of them. Again, makes this week in, week out college radio, lefty radio show worth listening to. And hey, if you like what you're hearing, please tell your friends. Again, we're a local program. It's become a little bit more difficult for us to advertise on social media and stuff. So really the best way for us to spread the word about this show, tell your friends. tune into Wider or listen to our podcast, where really I think I can safely say we are the only local working class radical outlet talking specifically about issues in Kalamazoo from a Kalamazoo working class perspective. Although this next story we're going to talk about is from the international level. But I think I would be remiss as, kind of an underground media commentator, to not mention this particularly important story. And again, it's something we've been talking about on the show since we started back in 2016. And it does look like Julian Assange is going to be extradited to the United States. Boo. Quick summation before I read the story. For those listening at home, let's remember the facts. Julian Assange is being extradited for basically publishing a leak provided by Chelsea Manning that showed U.S. soldiers committing war crimes in Afghanistan, killing innocent people from a helicopter. For this, the United States wants Julian Assange to spend life in prison. Julian Assange, to remind you, is not a U.S. citizen. He is a citizen of Australia, and I don't know if this particular article touches on it, but the vast majority of Australian citizens wants Julian Assange to be brought home. But the U.S., of course, is the biggest bully on the block. And what the Empire wants, the Empire gets. In this case, they want their pound of flesh from Mr. Assange. So this is an article originally published in Common Dreams. It's written by Brett Wilkins. Dark day for press freedom. Chomsky, Ellsberg, others slam Assange extradition. As supporters of Julian Assange held a news conference Friday at the United Kingdom's consulate in New York to demand freedom for the jailed WikiLeaks founder, a trio of leading leftist figures decried the British government's approval of the ailing Australian's extradition to the United States. In a statement published ahead of Friday's press conference, the three chairs of the Assange Defense Committee, linguist and political dissident Noam Chomsky, Pentagon Papers whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, and Pulitzer Prize-winning author Alice Walker, blasted UK Home Secretary Priti Patel's greenlighting of Assange's transfer to the U.S. earlier in the day. Assange plans to appeal the decision. So I do want to really emphasize, some of the most canonized, especially thinking of Daniel Ellsberg, most people across the political divide acknowledge that he did a very heroic thing, leaking the Pentagon Papers, telling the American public the truth about the Vietnam War. And he's been in Julian Assange's corner since the beginning. Going on to say, it's a sad day for Western democracy. The UK's decision to extradite Julian Assange to the nation that plotted to assassinate him, the nation that wants to imprison him for 175 years for publishing truthful information in the public interest, is an abomination, the trio said. And that refers to an alleged 2017 CIA scheme to kidnap or kill the WikiLeaks founder. Yeah, literally the CIA wanted to nab him from the embassy, extraordinary rendition and all that stuff. Hillary Clinton has joked in the past about just drone bombing the dude. We expect the world's most despised autocrats to persecute journalists, publishers, and whistleblowers. We expect totalitarian regimes to gaslight their people and crack down on those who challenge the government, they continued. Shouldn't we expect Western democracies to behave better? Not to call people like, Noam Chomsky naive, but like, I don't know, bro. That when, trying to throw journalists like Julian Assange away and throwing away the key. That sounds pretty totalitarian to me. I don't know. Actually, if worth looking up. Check out the concept of inverted totalitarianism, which is where a lot of lefty scholars describe the current state of affairs in U.S. society. And the basic give of that, it's like you don't necessarily have Big Brother watching you all the time, but the kind of cabal of corporations that control the government is in their own way running a kind of soft dystopian government. I don't know. It sounds maybe like kookier, or more conspiracy laden than it actually is. It's actually pretty boring. It's just like powerful people gonna do stuff, and it's easier. It's usually easier to satiate the population with a carrot rather than a stick. So anyway, it goes on to say, the U.S. government argues that its venerated Constitution does not protect journalism the government dislikes, and that publishing truthful information in the public interest is a subversive criminal act. This argument is a threat not only to journalism, but to democracy itself. The UK has shown its complicity in this farce by agreeing to extradite a foreigner based on politically motivated charges that collapse under the slightest scrutiny. Speakers at Friday's event in New York included Assange's father and progressive German parliamentarian Sivim Dagdalen, who said that today is a dark day for press freedom and a dark day for human rights. Julian Assange is a hero, she added. Every decent citizen and journalist is called to stand up. And again, that was an article from Common Dreams. Dark day for press freedom. Chomsky, Ellsberg, and others slam Assange extradition. So, in just a moment, we're going to pivot. I'm going to be giving the rest of the hour to a Democracy Now! Special about Juneteenth. Before I do that, though, I think there's one more thing I really wanted to touch on. And this is more of a quick hit than anything else, but little follow-up to the story we were talking about last week. The Patriot Front terrorists who plan to basically carry out a terrorist attack against the Pride event. I think I do need to couch it in those terms because something I have seen from the national press is kind of just dancing around those terms. I don't know if it's for legal reasons or something like that, but when 30 men pack into a U-Haul with a combination of firearms and melee weapons and body armor, they're probably not going to go peacefully protest. Actually, there is a model for that. If you want to go be a bigot to LGBT people, the Westboro Baptist Church, they usually show up with their horrid signs. But it's an altogether different situation when you are showing up ready to pulverize and terrorize. And again, the folks in Idaho, very, very lucky that these Nazis were caught before they made it to the event. But I wanted to point out a double standard here that I noticed. And this from like the local news outlet, but it was almost like kind of swept under the rug. Like not a lot of outlets were talking about this or the implications of it, but it just struck me as raw. The 31 men who were going to carry out this terrorist attack against the Pride event in Idaho were released on bond. How high was that bond, do you think? It's like, you would think people who are about to carry out a violent terrorist attack, it would probably cost a lot of money to get out of jail. And we're not even going to talk about like the whole cash bail system and stuff, but guess $300. These men, who ostensibly were likely going to go bludgeon and possibly shoot up a large public event, a large public pride event, were released on $300 bond. Whatever your other feelings about the justice system, let us remember a couple of key facts. When the United States is dealing with terrorists who trace their ideology to, perversion of Islam or something like that, quote unquote jihadi terrorists, there's a very different way our government deals with that. They do those extraordinary renditions. They put them in Guantanamo Bay. They have secret trials behind closed doors. They keep people at places like Guantanamo without any evidence for years and years. Under the Obama administration, a U.S. citizen who was traveling abroad, and was also about 17 years old, by the way, was assassinated by a drone strike because he was associated or suspected of associating with jihadi terrorists. Let us not forget the constant barrage of news updates of black and brown people being just killed by the police because they were suspected of having weapons. But 30 Nazi goons go to jail for with literally caught red-handed with guns and bats and body armor. Do they get renditioned extraordinarily? Do they get habeas corpus off to some black site? Do they get shot on sight? No, they get to pay the equivalent of like a hefty traffic fine and go home. And they're probably complaining about being persecuted online and, eating some KFC. They're going to be home to celebrate the 4th of July weekend and probably spread some more of their fascist propaganda around. There are stories where, we report on the show that, for a lot of our listener base, maybe you're not really learning anything new, but I think these stark examples do remind us exactly what kind of country that we are living in and the kind of biases at play when, again, Nazi terrorists will be at home celebrating 4th of July weekend. But an equivalent terrorist who is maybe, not white, not Christian, they are treated to all the best tortures and gulags that the United States Empire has to offer. All right, we're going to take a quick little break, and as I've been saying since the top of the hour, the next hour I'm going to be handing over, we're going to be rebroadcasting an episode of Democracy Now! It's their Juneteenth special. I want to thank y'all for tuning in to the program today. Again, you can find us a couple ways. We got a Facebook page, Media Cyphers. Check us out. We also have a podcast. That's Media Cyphers Kalamazoo. You can look that up on most podcasting applications. Try to put the best of our shows together. And we have a page on YouTube where we try to upload our full radio episodes and sometimes special video clips and interviews and things like that. Anyway, enjoy this next piece about Juneteenth and stick around till 2 o'clock when I will be doing my music program, Electropop Therapy. We're going to be doing a special summer show. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.